Take a deep breath and chant with me. One more time. One more time. नमस्कार, मैं गौरी अजित देशपांडे हिंदू वुमेन फोरम की ओर से आप सभी का इस परिषद में स्वागत करती हूँ। नमस्ते। आज का हमारा विषय हिंदू महिलाओं की स्थिति, शिक्षा एवं कानून, या तो हम कह सकते हैं हिंदू महिलाओं की प्रगति शिक्षा एवं कानून के क्षेत्र में। यह मेरा सौभाग्य है कि आज मुझे हमारी अध्यक्षा श्रीमती अस्मिता अद्वैत वैद्य जी को इस मंच पर आमंत्रित करने का अवसर प्राप्त हुआ है। श्रीमती अस्मिता अद्वैत वैद्य। श्रीमती अस्मिता अद्वैत वैद्य जी का परिचय, ये नासिक के एन.बी. ठाकुर लॉ कॉलेज की प्रिंसिपल हैं। इन्होंने अपनी पीएचडी नागपुर यूनिवर्सिटी से प्राप्त की है। इन्हें आइकॉन फाउंडेशन नासिक की ओर से तेजस्विनी पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया गया है। यह पुरस्कार शैक्षणिक क्षेत्र एवं सामाजिक कार्य में योगदान के लिए दिया जाता है। श्रीमती वैद्य आकाशवाणी अप्रूव्ड एक बहुत अच्छी गायिका भी हैं और नागपुर दूरदर्शन पर अनाउंसर भी रह चुकी हैं। श्रीमती वैद्य जी ने महिलाओं से संबंधित महिला एवं कानून इस विषय पर दिव्य मराठी इस दैनिक पत्र में स्तंभ लेखन भी किया है। और आप सभी को यह जानकारी देती हूँ कि इन्होंने एक टेलीफिल्म सरस्वती पुत्र, इसका दिग्दर्शन एवं निर्माण भी किया है। मैं हमारी अध्यक्षा श्रीमती अस्मिता अद्वैत वैद्य जी से विनंती करती हूँ कि आज के हमारे इस विषय पर हमें मार्गदर्शन दे और संबंधित सभी वक्ताओं का परिचय दे। श्रीमती अस्मिता अद्वैत वैद्य जी।
Welcome you all. First of all, I would like to call upon the other speakers of this session, Miss Padma Kuppa, Madam. She is here. Dr. Sheetal Godbole, Madam. And Srimati Indira Tiwari, Madam. माँ सरस्वती को वंदन, आदरणीय व्यासपीठ को नमन और उपस्थित सभी अभिव्यक्तों को अभिवादन करती हूँ। हिंदू वुमेन, शी टेक्स केयर ऑफ फैमिली, गिव्स प्रायोरिटी टू फैमिली मेंबर फॉर गिविंग हर सर्विसेज, tries to give complete shelter to her children, known for her devotion to family all over the globe, teaches everyone real meaning of life, personal as well as social, have capacity to create Raji Shivaji, Swami Vivekananda and many more, who herself is Durga, Saraswati and Lakshmi. She is a Hindu woman. Shakti Rupena Saraswati, I stoop, complete respect to her. Today, we are going to have a discussion on Hindu women, law and education. Today, we all gathered here to talk about, as I said, Hindu women, education and law. We are very much concerned about the education of Hindu women because today we all are completely convinced that Hindu women, if given an education and chance, she can be at the top of any of the office. She possesses such inbuilt capacities that if facilities and opportunities are given, are placed before her, she can go ahead and even prove herself in this competitive world. Hindu women's education was really an issue 100 years back when Ramabai Ranade, Savitribai Phule, Maharshi Karve fought for initiating women education. Because of their efforts, we all are here showing our participation in every field. The scenario is changing gradually. Bharat is famous for its culture, tradition, religion, and geographical characteristics. At the same time, it is also known for male-dominated nation, because of which women education become routine only after struggle and lot of efforts. Traditionally, women have assumed secondary position at home and even in public life. To wash out that effect, we all are thinking for the betterment of Hindu women, and education and law, these are the two tools through which we wanted to empower her. Let us see what is the importance of women education. It is well observed fact that education makes the person smart, versatile, knowledgeable, and sophisticated. Education is an important tool for promoting gender equality and advancement of female youth in socio-economic and political development of nation. When we say empowering women through education, it means that using education as a tool to bring women on platform of understanding what is right and what is wrong, empowering her with the skill to take advantage of opportunities, and embedding a confidence in her to meet the challenges of life. Female youths, who later translate to women, women are the center of activities of family, society, the community, and all facets of life. Their contributions to the household activities, income earning activities, society participation are noticeable. Higher education is important for everyone, but it is especially significant for girls and women. This is true not only because higher education is entry point to other opportunities, but also because the higher educational achievements of women can have impact within the family and across generations. Investment of girls' education results in grooming positive family culture. Increased knowledge, self-confidence, awareness of gender equality, realization of reality, improved understanding are the indicators of educated women. It is very relevant to know what are the steps taken for Hindu women education. Women's education has assumed special significance in the context of Bharat's planned development, as it is incorporated in every 5 years plan as the major program for development of women. Universalization of elementary education, enrollment and retention of girls in schools, promotion of Balwadis and Balwadis, rising number of schools and colleges of arts, science, and professionals for girls, polytechnic, girls' hostel, multipurpose institutions, and adult education programs are some of the steps being taken by both central and state government in Bharat to boost up women education. Let us see what is the present position of Hindu women. Though we are convinced with the fact that women education is beneficial to the family as well as to the society at large, we are not practicing it. We are striving for women education. There are commonly observed reasons for the same. The reasons are associated with combination of many factors, including social, cultural, economic, educational, demographic, political, and administration, and so on. The root causes for low literacy among women in Bharat are higher dropout rate, lower enrollment, girl child as second mother, dowry system, poverty and child labor practice, poor infrastructural facilities, early marriage, ineffective law enforcing machinery, poor political will and determination. New challenges there also has been posed before Hindu women, such as crimes against women are increasing day by day, security is a big question mark before her. Acid attack, domestic violence, dowry, female infanticide, sex-selective abortions, rape. Rape is one of the most common crime against women in Bharat and is a national problem. New Delhi has the highest rate of rape reports. Enhancement in punishment, immediate action, and establishment of fast-track court are some of the positive steps taken to curb such crimes against women. Even the sexual harassment, trafficking, these are all the causes which makes her to think whether to go out or not. Even the globalization has brought some changes. Globalization has direct impact on Hindu women life. The advancement of technological development and changes in advanced medical treatment put Hindu women into new problems such as surrogacy, sex determination test, feticide, etc. The present challenge put before Hindu women is regarding the surrogacy. The journey of a Hindu woman from mother to that of surrogate mother is not easy, and it is full of thorns. Even law in this regard is not clear. There are many issues regarding the nationality of surrogate child, the contractual obligations, the rights of surrogate mother. Live-in relationship is another challenge which has been put before the women. It is, of course, against her samskaras and against the custom and religion. But still, she only has to suffer and has to undergo the repercussions of live-in. Yet many things regarding live-in relationship are also not clear. Her marital status and rights, status of their children, succession rights, all rights incidental to marriage are still in questions. Objectification is again third kind of a challenge which has been put before her. The ideal image of Hindu women is getting affected because of her objectification. She appears in almost every advertisement, that too in a very indecent form. You might be aware of the fact that she is coming in almost all the advertisement, that too we are sometimes get questioned that whether it is relevant to have her presence in the advertisement or not. But still she is there. Though there is a law pertaining to such practices, but nobody takes cognizance of it. Thus all these factors, these are the reasons for low literacy among women in Bharat. Not only the infrastructural lacunae, but lack of social will results into less percentage of educated Hindu women. Now let us see what is the scenario on the other part of the topic, that is law. How many laws are there? You will be surprised to know that there are near about 65 independently laws made only for women. How many of you are aware of this? But these laws yet not have been reached to you. Law is the means to empower every human being. Many laws shape the life of women. Hindu women being more family oriented, religious and having more customary impact on her personality, she is more inclined towards the follow of existing laws. Before independence, after independence, and even after globalization, lots of efforts are made to improve her societal image by providing many facilities and comfort to her through laws. At this point of discussion, I think it is necessary to find out how law empowered the Hindu women. We have the constitutional safeguards for women. As you all know, the preamble of the Constitution begins with the word, "We, the people of India," which include men and women of all caste, religion, etc. It wishes to render equality of status and opportunity to every man and woman. The preamble again assures the dignity of individuals, which includes the dignity of women. On the basis of preamble, several important enactments have been brought into operation pertaining to every walk of life: family, succession, guardianship, employment, which aims at providing and protecting the status, rights, and dignity of women. Even the fundamental rights are there. Part 3 of the Constitution, consisting of Article 12 to 35, guarantees rights and is essential for the attainment of development of every human being to the fullest extent, as has been pointed out by Justice P.N. Bhagwati in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India. Article 40 deals with the equality. It is not working? We have directive principles, we have constitutional rights, and thirdly, we have legislative measures. The next slide highlights about the constitutional safeguards for the women. The preamble, as I said, it speaks about the equality of status. We have Article 14, which deals about equality before law. Article 15 speaks about prohibition of discrimination on the grounds of sex. I will not go in detail. Article 16 highlights on equality of opportunity in matter of public employment. It also deals and focused on the equal pay for equal work. Then Article 19 1G of the Constitution guarantees all citizens regarding the right to practice any profession. And Article 21, which is very important, which says no person shall be deprived of his life or the personal liberty except according to procedure established by law. A single line consisting of 18-word article has gained maximum judicial attention and widened the interpretation. Life in Article 21 is not merely the physical act of breathing, but includes inner, unseen, unperceived activity of human being. It includes right to basic necessities of life, like a right to privacy, right to live with dignity, right to education, right to avail facilities for rehabilitation, right to take birth, and so on. This article pushed and put women on parallel platform with men and opened many opportunity doors. Article 23 is equally important, which speaks about the right against exploitation and prohibition of traffic in human beings. Directive principles, which includes Article 39A, 39D, Article 42, which focused on the work and many facilities regarding maternity relief, and Article 44, which deals with Uniform Civil Code. Article 51 highlights on the fundamental duties. We have a list of laws which are particularly framed for the women. In our society, when we became more concerned about women and her position in society, we find that she grows with some limitations, lives with home limitations throughout the life. In her childhood, she is under the protection of her father, after marriage under the protection of husband, and in old age under the mercy of her sons. In order to ameliorate the condition of women in Bharat, legislature enacted number of laws right from 19th century. As many laws they are framed. We can study those laws in 3 phases: colonial era, independence era, and after globalization, that is globalization era. In colonial, that is before independence, some evil customs were practiced and those were taken away, like sati pratha, widows remarriage, female infanticide, child marriage, and other laws which I have written there. Those were framed. In independence era, many laws were framed for empowering the women. It was well realized by everyone that unless and until women are empowered, Bharat will not grow. Various legislations were passed with a view to curb the imbalance in gender hierarchy and aid in women's empowerment. They can be enlisted. I have given the list of these many laws. They all are relating to the marriage, divorce, maintenance, adoption, succession, guardianship, and immoral traffic, widows remarriage, maternity benefit, equal remuneration, and many other laws. So after that, in globalization era, we find some new laws, they were framed. New laws were framed in globalization era because after 1990, India opted for globalization. This has brought lot many changes in society. Society became more urbanized, technologically equipped, scientifically developed. It entered into cyber age and even it deals with the computer age. This has put new challenges before her. To cope up with those, the other legislative measures were made, and PCPNDT, that is law prohibiting the sex determination test or other laws, particularly Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013, it was passed. New challenges such as surrogacy, live-in relationship, contract marriages are put before her, and we have to provide her solution. Some bills still are pending, which will make her more comfortable. Despite of increase in women's upward graph, dismal sex ratio, female infanticide, sexual harassment at workplace, and female child labor, surrogacy are worrying indicators. Now, Hindu women are empowered by legal provisions and many rights are given to her. This has resulted into meaningful development of her personality. But still some steps are required for empowering the Hindu women through education. Law and education are most important means of empowering women with knowledge, skill, and confidence. She is well aware of the fact that she is shielded with legal rights and protection. Realizing the importance of these tools of empowerment, many educational facilities are provided to her, many laws are enacted. As a result, Hindu women is getting educated and acquiring better position in the society. They have proved themselves much competent for any work assigned to them. Because of her inbuilt capabilities like concentration, determination, patience, and tolerance, she could achieve a lot in small span of time. At present, those who got chance to go for education could go ahead, but many sisters are still has to go miles together to participate fully in development process. Some changes? Okay. So I'll just wind up by giving the steps which are required. Restructuring existing education system is one of the steps. First is the value-embedded women education. Women is mother first and has to shape the next generation, and therefore many values such as truthfulness, honesty, empathy, and dedication are calling that foster human good and progress need to be preserved and transferred from one generation to another. The second one is creating new values. Yeah. I'll just take 3 minutes, not more than 3. Okay, should I stop? Okay, if you feel like, I'll just go through the slides. Because, yeah, definitely, definitely, madam, no problem. Some important suggestions are there, so you can go through. Actually, this is very important for you. That is, value-embedded education is very important. Creating new values. Add-on courses are very important. Awareness programs are required to be there. E-courses are there. Entrepreneurial skills are required to be imbibed in the education. Self-help trainings, inclusion, financial. Okay, I'll just stop because many of my friends, they are taking objection. मुझे ऐसे लगता है कि यहाँ बैठी हुई हर बहना सुसंस्कारों का भंडार है. हर एक महिला सुस्वभावी, सुभाषिणी, सुवचनी, सुकन्या, सुमाता, सुभार्या, सुजला, सगुणा, सुगरण, सुशीला है. इन सब आभूषणों से अलंकृत है. कर्तृत्व, दातृत्व, मातृत्व और कर्तव्य, यह इसके अंगभूत गुण है. इसके साथ ही सहनशीलता, सृजनता, कष्ट करना उसका स्वभाव है. घर को और समाज को एक बंधन में बांधे रखने की ताकत उसमें है. सिर्फ ज़रूरत है उसे इन सब का महसूस करवाना, एहसास दिलवाना. ये सब करने के बाद ही मुझे लगता है स्वामी विवेकानंद जी ने सोची हुई जाज्वल्य भारतीय नारी दुनिया के सामने हम रख पाएंगे. आई एम रियली थैंकफुल टू ऑल ऑफ यू फॉर पेशेंटली हियरिंग मी, दो आई हैव टेकन लॉट ऑफ टाइम. Thank you very much for having a dialogue with you. We will continue with the session. And now I call upon Ms. Padma Kuppa ma'am She is an IT project manager in the automotive industry in Metro Detroit, holds a bachelor's degree from REC Warangal. She focuses on interreligious cooperation at HAF and is community activist. She is a co-founder for Troy Area Interfaith Group and the Outreach Committee at Bharatiya Temple Metropolitan Detroit. She is volunteer of Hindu Mandir Executive Conference. She is an advisory board member of Women's Interfaith Organization. She has contributed to World Book of Faith. So now I request her to express her views.
On it. Namaste and hello. My name is Padma Kuppa. I am here. I'm an IT analyst and a writer. So what am I doing here? Talking to Hindu women from all over the world and Bharat about education and law and violence against women. So when I started this, I need the clicker back, sorry. So I thought I should explain to you. How many of you are teachers or in education? How many of you are lawyers? Okay. So there's quite a number of you who are like me, neither teachers nor lawyers. Yes, exactly. And so what the purpose of this talk is primarily what I heard from the keynote or the opening remarks, which is what can each of us do to be more active on all of these topics that each of these panels has. If you can advance. So this is a journey, my 10-year journey of being an engineer and a writer to being a Hindu activist. So in 2010, somebody asked me in the ladies' room earlier, in America, you must have everybody is equal, all religions are equal and equally. I said, no, actually, that's not true. Minorities do sometimes get the short end of opportunity because we are not the majority, and we have to learn to speak up. So there was a government-sponsored event in 2005 in the city in which I lived, and I decided that I would take that up, and I formed an interfaith group to help so that people would understand what is it to be a different religion besides the majority religion, which in America is Christian. Oh, I have to go back. That side. Okay, but this is way further ahead than I needed. Okay, yes, it's changing. So the reason I did this is because I was a mother. As she said earlier, my earlier speaker said, as mothers, we want the best for our children. So because of this exclusion, I formed an interfaith group with others in the community in Troy. That brought me to the attention of an organization called the Hindu American Foundation. I now sit on the board of the Hindu American Foundation, and it's an organization that does advocacy. So I just wanted to explain a little bit what we do and what we promote. Advocacy is speaking out on various issues that affect Hindus in America, and those are also including the human rights abuses against Hindus around the world. We promote human dignity, mutual respect, and pluralism, that idea that we have one truth but many paths to that. And so what we do primarily at HAF is educate the American public about Hinduism. The first time that we went, we interact with people in Congress and people in the executive branch, and they don't even know the difference between Hindu and Shia and Sunni. And so we've had to explain basic things like that. We also speak out about issues affecting Hindus worldwide. Oftentimes in public policy in the United States, there are people who will come to Congress to speak, and as they make laws, they usually talk only about the issues of minorities, or they promote a certain picture that is not always accurate. So our job is to help paint a more accurate picture. And the other thing that we do, the third and final thing that is critical in our advocacy, is to build bridges with institutions and individuals whose work aligns with HAF's objectives. We focus on human and civil rights and public policy, and as well as media, academic, and interfaith relations. So, for example, on human rights issues, the reason that HAF, I came to know of HAF, is because the Hindu American Foundation's executive director reached out to me during the time when I was facing exclusion from the National Day of Prayer in the city of Troy to make sure that I had the support, legal support that I needed. HAF focuses on Hindu human rights because organizations who did human rights work around the world, such as Human Rights Watch, were not covering the plight of Hindus whose human rights were denied. We publish an annual human rights report, and tomorrow at 11 o'clock, our senior director, Samir Kalra, who is here in the back, who is an attorney and our human rights fellow, will be presenting about that particular topic. And as I said earlier, they didn't know the difference between a Hindu and a Muslim. So we do a lot of education, making sure that people know what Hindus believe and who we are and what our needs are. And we make sure that we are the ones telling the stories, not others. And one of the primary things that we try to do, because we are in a position to do so in America, is to tell the stories of those who can't. I don't know if you can see here, but this is on our website. And we highlight every year in our human rights report human rights abuses by country. So we have Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Pakistan. In fact, earlier I made contact with women's delegation of Hindu women from Malaysia so that we can be in touch with them to find out more about the human rights abuses so that we can put that in the eye of people who are making laws in America. This is another image from our website. This is our human rights report. Every year we publish this and provide this to congressional offices, think tanks, and other organizations so that they are aware of the human rights abuses that are met by Hindus. So I'm going to talk for a moment about Pakistan, because that is a case study that we all know as Bharat. We know that there are many abuses in Pakistan against Hindus. Religious minorities in Pakistan, including Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, and Ahmadi Muslims, face systematic violence, rampant discrimination, and widespread restrictions on their religious freedom. Women of minority faiths, in particular, comprise the most vulnerable segments in Pakistani society, and their fundamental human rights are violated with impunity. Unfortunately, no one was speaking about this until HAF went to the U.S. Congress and started holding U.S. congressional hearings and briefings. A lot of the time, the organizations that go and speak out on human rights issues do not consider the plight of Hindus, and particularly Hindu women. This, I don't know, again, if you can see this. This is, again, a slide from our website. In 2012, we did a congressional briefing on minority women's rights in Pakistan. We took case studies of specific women whose rights were abused and brought them to the attention of lawmakers. Now, why is Pakistan important to me as an American? I'm an Indian American. India should be important to me, right? But my tax dollars, as an American, I pay taxes into the American government. I want my government to make sure that they use that tax money that I pay them for the correct cause. So I understand that they need to provide human rights, they need to provide humanitarian aid, but they should not provide money. My tax dollars that I am paying to my government should not go to oppress somebody else. In that way, we have highlighted the plight of Hindu women in Pakistan. In January of this year, we had a press release, and this is very important that you engage the media in information like this, because they are the ones who can then take that information and make it more common knowledge. In 2014, there was a brutal rape and murder of an 8-year-old Hindu girl. And you can see in all our, we have policy briefs on Pakistan that we hand to government officials every year, pretty much. And we have action alerts that members of the Hindu American Foundation, people who are other Hindus and non-Hindus alike, who are members of our organization in the United States, that they can call in, they can do campaigns. We have the power of the internet at our hands. So through the power of the internet, we have petitions. Earlier, Dr. Shiva told us, contact someone about one of the proposals from Monsanto. Similarly, we ask our members to contact the U.S. Congress when we want them to change policy. many of these incidents against Hindu women are met with impunity in Pakistan, and so we want to make sure that that information is conveyed to lawmakers in our country. And we've actually done a video. We had a group of doctors that went to a refugee camp in Jodhpur so that we could show the plight of the Pakistani Hindu refugees as well as that of the Bangladeshi Hindu refugees that come into India and how much they're suffering in their native countries. Finally, one of the topics that I really want to talk about is what the impact of proselytism is. Predatory proselytism is a word that we use when we speak about what missionaries do to people who are poor or in need of health care. And what happens these days is the common concept of religious freedom in the United Nations Article 18, in their Human Rights Article 18, it doesn't say anything about the freedom from intrusion and exploitation. And we know as women that there are many women who are in need in India, and there are many women who will make sacrifices for their children. And so that imbalance of power between gender and economic status, that's critical in ensuring that we need to make that a very important principle when missionaries approach Hindu women and Hindu families. That is a problem that they are facing, that their human rights are abused. And so one of the things that we have done is brought that to the attention of many interfaith groups. And I have gone around the country speaking on this issue, talking about missionary groups and the impact that they are having on the Hindu families and on Hindu women and Hindu children. In fact, in a magazine called Hinduism Today that is published out of Hawaii in 2012, I told the story of a watchman and his wife and daughter, and how the daughter converted and was baptized because they wanted health care for their child, how the family had to be forcibly accept Christianity in order for that medical care that they needed. One of the other things I'd like to point out is there's not a lot of men here. Violence against women actually is something that is not just a women's issue. I understand that this is the Hindu Women's Forum, but this should be a topic covered in every single forum, not just the Hindu Women's Forum, because men will ignore when something is labeled a women's issue. We should also hold the dominant group, because men are the ones who predominantly hold power, who take decisions. They should be held accountable so that they can self-reflect and acknowledge their role. Finally, actually not finally, there's a TED Talk by Jackson Katz, who's an author, filmmaker, gender violence prevention activist, who talks about it as violence against women is a men's issue. And so I would request, especially since Bharat is the roots of the tree that I sprang from, that we need to fix what is going on at home. Gender issues are also very important, not only as women, but as mothers of sons. We shouldn't worry about when our children are going out with when our daughters are going out with short skirts, but whether our sons are behaving when they see a girl in a short skirt. So on that, I will tell you, I hope that you all are empowered to do something as well. If an engineer and a writer like myself can take on these issues and be involved in an organization like the Hindu American Foundation, find a cause, find something that you can participate in, and please, please become an activist, become an advocate on women's issues. Thank you.
Now, I will request Dr. Sheetal Godbole. She has 3 master's degree and a PhD in educational communication. Presently, Chief Academic Advisor in SSRVM. She was Principal and founder member of Dayananda Educational Society since 1989, having trained more than 600 teachers of pre-primary and primary level. She is known as active participant in public cleanliness campaign under Dr. Nana Saheb Parulekar Sakar Charity Trust. She is going to focus on quality education in rural area for women. Dr. Shrimati Sheetal Godbole.
Respected dais here, my mothers at this side, all my sisters and few of my brothers. My today's topic is quality education in rural areas for women. Before I talk about women, let me explain my views about education. Here we'll see the broader concept of education. Education means to develop someone's personality as a whole. Education is a key factor which can initiate change in the human being as well as in the society. Education increases literacy and helps to improve awareness in all the fields. Education makes you confident and also leads you towards financial independence. Education also increases humanity and belongingness in the persons. Dear all, here are some common causes of poor educational conditions in rural areas. Especially, girl child in rural areas continue to be deprived of quality education because schools are far from their residence. Also, there is shortage of trained and committed teachers, scarcity of teaching aids, textbooks, and other required material, poor learning environment at school and also in the family, lack of parents' awareness towards education, ignorance of parents, blind beliefs and superstitions in rural society. Sometimes syllabus also not suitable to fulfill their life skills. And even school timings also are heavy and inconvenient. If a girl child will get proper education right time, she will groom in a mature woman in future. Woman will be Shakti Swarupa. Especially rural woman will be Shakti Swarupa if she will be literate and educationally strong, if she will be physically and mentally healthy, if she will be financially independent, if she will be prudent homemaker, well-bred and caring mother, and if she will be defensive. Women also should be aware about the society and should be an environmentalist. Ultimately, if woman would be happy and peaceful, she will create formative family. Actually, we all are performing these kind of roles we are performing, but especially I'm talking about women in a rural area. Education leads to the road of betterment of community and the nation at large. When we think about the reformation in education, we have to point out what all prevents education in rural area to develop. Here are some tasks and even solutions. Because of superstitions and blind beliefs in rural areas, society is not allowing women to learn. The professionals like doctors, engineers, and in all fields should come forward and give at least 1 hour in a month and visit nearby rural areas and take the responsibility to make rural people aware and understand the importance of girl-child education and women education. Standard of government schools needs to raise. Government should provide proper aids. Government has started many schemes and programs on education, but due to lack of communication and implementation, we are not getting actual results. So serious steps should be taken by government officers with the help of NGOs for proper execution of government schemes and programs in field of girl-child education. A legal provision will help rescue girls from early marriages and early motherhood. Recently, I visited Jharkhand, and there I have seen this scenario. At the age of 10 and 11, girls, they are aware about their marriage. They know that now within 1 year, I will get married. So this awareness is there in the mind of these small girls. So we should stop all these things. A large number of teachers refuse to teach in rural areas. And those that do are usually underqualified. Many times I have seen it. So education department should take strict action as teachers are not taking interest in teaching rural areas. We all are talking about higher education, but I would like to focus on education which makes the foundation strong. Open more Sanskar Kendras or learning centers where value-based education can be imparted for preschool and primary going children to make the foundation strong. Train local women from the community to run such kind of kendras, hire women from the local community as teachers, train them to run these centers, and provide them ongoing support to provide qualitative education. Need-based and flexible syllabus is required, especially for girls, to increase their awareness about marriage. What is marriage? What is the meaning of the word marriage? Family. What is the meaning of the word family? Health, earning, and soft skills, and related to their day-to-day life. This is what also I have seen. What the girl child will do, what is the value of X and Y? What they will do with all this kind of knowledge? That's why they are not taking interest in learning. Parents even are not ready to send their children, girl child, in the school. So I would like to focus on make the syllabus flexible. Steps should be taken to stop dropouts of girl child, like provision of special transportation exclusively for girls, proper toilets, and flexible school timings. We need to think, we need to focus on all these solutions. Here is a case study of Jharkhand. Recently, I visited the schools at Jharkhand, running by Art of Living Foundation, under the guidance of our spiritual guru, His Holiness Sri Sri Ravi Shankar Ji. I am very lucky. I have got guru like Ravi Shankar Ji, and it's my pleasure to work in this foundation. After observing the schools there, I found that students and people are attracting towards schools. The organization is providing books, uniform, midday meal, and everything what is required for education. But the main problem is of committed and trained teachers. Foundation is facing many problems of getting trained teachers over there. In the same way, the project of Anganwadi, run by Maharashtra government, is also one of the best examples. But again, the Anganwadis are facing same problem of trained teachers. Here, I would like to suggest that special need-based teachers training program should be designed for rural and tribal areas to get the local women involved in the schools. When we are sitting in the city in AC room and we start planning the curriculum, what should be there in the rural areas. It will not happen. Most of you are aware about it. So actively we have to participate in that. We should know, we should understand what their actual problems are. Here you can see the schools are run by Vyakti Vikas Kendra, by Art of Living. Surprisingly, girls are entering the school in more number. Girls are also getting vocational training. They're stitching bags over there. They're stitching their own uniforms. Here I would like to focus on two main solutions. The use of ICT. The 21st century is considered as an information communication technology. Communication as a two-way process stands for the sharing of ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and information with others. Main problem rural teachers are facing is the problem of pronunciation. When I visited Jharkhand and in many areas, recently as I am putting case study of Jharkhand, हम इसको बैग कहते हैं. तो सभी टीचर्स बोलते हैं मैडम जी ये बच्चे बैग नहीं बोलेंगे वो बैग बोलेंगे और खुद टीचर भी बैग ही बोलती है. तो what children will follow? So the main problem the teachers are facing is of pronunciation, use of correct grammatical language, lack of ambience, and lack of proper guidance. To overcome such kind of problems, digital classes will prove very effective solution. By the use of ICT, we can train rural teachers as well as students over there. The another solution I would like to suggest is cultural exchange program. We can have teachers' cultural exchange programs at two levels. Rural teachers with urban teachers within the nation and international teachers' cultural exchange programs. It will help to unfold flair of arts like music, dance, fine arts, etc., lifestyle of people, language, food habits, beliefs, and rituals also. You know, when I have visited many of rural schools, the children in rural area, they are fantastic artists. And when I ask the question, who teaches them this art? Who is their art teacher? They call one teacher, one lady or gents teacher, and they say, ma'am ji, we have appointed this person as an art teacher, but actually art is there inborn. So these rural children are inborn artists, but no one is there to guide them in a proper way. Benefits of ICT. To motivate children in rural area, we need strong teachers. The role of teacher is changing now. The role of teacher in this era of globalization, teacher today plays different roles as educator, motivator, guide, counselor, coach, assimilator, generator, facilitator, and also communicator of knowledge. ICT provides opportunity for integrating theory with practices. The use of ICT is very useful for distance learning and to provide experts and trained teachers at remote and rural areas. ICTs are potentially powerful tool for exchanging educational opportunities, both formal and non-formal, to previously underserved constituencies, scattered and rural populations, groups traditionally excluded from education due to cultural and social reasons, such as ethnic minorities, of course, girls and women. Benefits of cultural exchange programs. Cultural exchange will increase the belongingness in rural and urban areas, in provinces and countries too. It will help to develop mutual understanding and leadership development. It also expands professional fields and brings confidence in teachers. Thus, ICT and cultural exchange programs will bring qualitative change in teachers and will help to change the outlook about the rural education of women. I know delegates from 50 countries and different provinces of Bharat are here. So it is possible to have this kind of exchange programs. In the morning, in the inaugural session, it was declared that the next Congress will happen in 2018. We all together will do some constructive work in all the fields with the help of very important tool, education. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, madam. Our third speaker is Srimati Indira Tiwari, madam. She is going to focus on coverage of Hindus in K-12 curriculum. Srimati Indira Tiwari is an educationalist. She has an MSc in microbiology and MPhil in life sciences from JNU, New Delhi. She has taught in different capacities for over 20 years. Her social service activities in USA include running Bal Vihar and teaching Hindi to students of Bal Vihar. She has made multimedia course lecture on biology for middle school and introductory college level. Currently, she is writing a book for intermediate students on select biology topics on molecular biology, cell biology, and biochemistry. Ma'am, I request you to present your paper.
Before I start my talk, I just want to let you know that I recently started wearing bifocals. And I am finding it a little bit hard to get used to them. So I might look weird trying to kind of see. It's only because I'm trying to find a field of vision through which I can see. So I'm not that weird. Okay. So I will be talking on coverage of Hindus in K-12 curriculum. K-12 means kindergarten to class 12th curriculum, how Hindus are depicted. And the interest in this area developed because when my children were studying in US, when they were small, I found that Hindus were not really described ever in positive terms. So when we had this women's conference earlier, I talked about how Hindus were depicted in foreign countries. So I studied how they were depicted in UK, USA, and Pakistan. And then I thought, let me look how they are depicted in India. And by the time my children were studying in India, so I looked at their books, and sure enough, I did not find even the description of Hindus was even worse in Indian books. In NCERT books I am talking about, because those are the books I have seen. So let us see what are the descriptors that are used for Hindus. When Hindus are talked about, what we talk about, the first word that is always described all around the world is caste. That's who we are. We practice casteism, we are castes. And we exploit. So the exploitation, unrest, discrimination, prejudice, Brahmins, untouchables, these are the words that are used again and again. Whenever any topic, it could be literature, it could be anything. how the houses are made. If they are talking about how the architecture was or the houses were made, they will say, okay, and there were some people who were untouchables, they were poor. What kind of houses do you think they lived in? They lived in very poor houses, while the upper caste people lived in big houses. Now you are describing architecture, there is no need to bring in untouchables and, but there is this very sly attempt to drill into the young minds, impressionable minds, that this society is very discriminatory, it's not good, they were bad people, basically. And this starts from, environmental science starts from, I think, class 1 or 2, and that is when they start this. And just the sophistication level goes, and the information level goes higher and higher. What are the words that are never used to describe Hindus? We are not bad people. Oh, I changed my, okay. So the words that are never used to describe Hindus is that women are treated respectfully. In no other society or religion, women are treated as gods and goddesses. I mean, all the important deities, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Shakti, in no other religion you would find that, but you will not find a mention of this in our books. Gurus and teachers had the same place as God, and the respect for environment, which everybody is, it is a fashion, everybody is talking about how to save environment, everybody is spending so much money on funding research how to save environment, but nowhere it is ever mentioned that in Hindu Sanskriti, it's part of our religious practices. We worship trees, we worship rivers, and there are cultures where you don't cut trees, and at night we cannot pluck flowers or even pluck leaves. So this is the amount of respect we have for our environment, but it is never mentioned in the books. So when you are talking about caste, you could talk about a little bit of this also if you had honest mind, but no, that is not there. So, and another big thing about Hindus is that if there is a difference of opinion, you don't take out your dagger and slay the head of the other person, what you do is debate. There is this parampara of शास्त्रार्थ, कि अगर इतने सारे examples हैं पुराने कि जहाँ पर शास्त्रार्थ हुआ और जब किसी का डिसएग्रीमेंट था, फिर जो जीत गया उसकी बात मान ली गई और जो हार गया उसने कंसीड कर दिया. कहीं पर भी ऐसा नहीं देखा जाएगा कि एक मत के लोगों ने मार पिटाई करी और दूसरे को अपने आप से एग्री करवा लिया. दैट इज नॉट देयर, बट इट इज नॉट मेंशन्ड इन द बुक्स. Now the question is, if they are doing this, why should they do it? What is the motivation? The motivation is that in spite of having different foods, different costumes, different customs and languages, if you look at the people of India, we all are very diverse group of people. But was it, I keep saying India, I was told not to use this word, Bharat, okay? So, but what is it that unites us all? It is our Hindu Sanskriti. And even people who belong to other religions, who are practicing Christians or Muslims, they may not agree with this, but they are practicing Hindu Sanskriti, including people in Pakistan. Recently, I started viewing some serials, Pakistani serials, and I found they have the same Sanskriti that we do, as far as marriages are concerned. So they are practicing Hindu Sanskriti, they may not agree with it. So this is what unites all of us. So the best way to, dominate us is to kill this uniting factor. So the great uniter is Hindu Dharma. And what is it in Hindu Dharma which connects people with each other? It's gods and goddesses, temples and murtis, sacred texts, Sanskrit, and Brahmins. Now you will not be surprised if I tell you that these 5 entities are the object of most humiliation and most attacks in Hindu books. Gods and goddesses, okay, Brahmins are quite wild lot in all the books, but they were the people who preserved the way of life and guided society. They were not always a very strong group of people who subjugated others or kicked out people from the village and all. They were the people who lived in abject poverty by choice, because they took upon themselves that they will not live a life of luxury. So they lived a life of poverty, they studied and they taught. That's what they did. But that would never be mentioned. Then another is Sanskrit. All the texts are in Sanskrit, and this was the language which was spoken until mid-19th century, before it was wiped out. So as I said earlier, that if you want to subjugate Hindu society, you have to discredit all the pillars, all the 5 pillars that we talk about. That is one tool. Another is to present wrong comparisons between Hindu Dharma and other religions. So while you show that how unjust the Hindu society was, at the same time you show about other religions like Muslims or Christians, how just they were. And I will give you examples later on. And also you prop up entities like caste group, regional groups, non-Hindus to fight this. So instead of having a big Hindu lot, if you can have different caste groups, that's easier to demolish, because then people can just fight among themselves. So now you have different groups which are wronged. The caste groups, the language groups, some wrong has been committed to them, so they are wronged people. And the wronged people have to have special rights, then only you can make up to them of all the wrongs that have been done to them. So then they have to have rights like personal laws, reservation in jobs, and very often we hear about human rights of murderers. I mean, very recently this fellow, the terrorist, was hanged in Tihar jail, and how many people were crying for the human rights because his parents were not informed on time. So then you have to talk about the right to kill and murder, right to subsidize electricity, food, and everything else. And now who is doing all the wrongs to the wronged people? It is always the Hindu. And what I am going to read further is the impression that you come off after I read from class 1 to class 10th, the social studies books. And this is the impression you come off with, that a Hindu man does not let women and people of lower caste study Sanskrit or holy text. He mistreats widows and burns them alive, and very carefully they mention Sati, but never Johar, because if they mention Johar, they will have to mention something else. So only Sati. Then they exploit and discriminate against people of lower caste who meekly and against their wishes serve the people of upper caste. And the impression we get is that Hindu society is all about caste and gender discrimination, untouchability and oppression. And when they describe Sikhism and other religious traditions, they fail to mention that why they came up, especially with Sikhism. The description of Sikhism comes in, Guru Nanak, Guru Arjan, all this comes in, but it is not mentioned why they were formed. What they say is they were formed because of the inequalities of caste system. People were fed up, people of lower caste were fed up with the caste system, so the Sikhism group came up. And they never failed to mention that beef was a delicacy that was enjoyed by Hindus. Always that will be mentioned. And what is the effect of this right industry? What it does is that it creates a whole population which is alienated, which feels alienated, which is led to believe that they were wronged. And no matter how hard they try, they cannot come forward because there is a conspiracy against them. So it kills the individual effort. And they become sort of burden to the society. And how does it affect the... So how does it affect the Hindu society? What it does, when from childhood, what you have studied is that your ancestors were wrong, they were bad people, you become ashamed. And I am not making this up. Recently, I attended a talk in IIT Kanpur, and this professor of social studies, humanities, he got the Best Teachers Award, and they were discussing Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And so somehow Hinduism came in, and he says, Ki, I am ashamed to be Hindu. I was just born a Hindu in Hindu family. I'm not a practicing Hindu, but I am sometimes very ashamed to be a Hindu because of some groups, what they do. Now, I have never heard a person of another religion saying that they are ashamed to be a Muslim because what ISIS is doing. Why should you feel ashamed? Even if somebody is doing something wrong, I mean, everybody in Hindu is not a saint. So even if somebody is doing something wrong, why should you feel ashamed? Thousands of years of civilization, thousands of years of achievements should just go down the drain because 1 or 2 person or 1 or 2 groups did something which you don't agree with. So, but that sentence, he's not alone. That sentence comes from many people, and it comes because of this education that, is this a pointer? Okay. So this comes from all this education, all that is inculcated in your mind when you were a child. That, you know, you are bad people, so you become ashamed. And second thing happens is that you feel afraid to talk about injustices meted out to you. When I was in US, there was a big temple which was source of attraction for them. It served a big, large area. And some people, through meat, they cut pieces of meat and blood, and they threw on the walls of the temple. Now this is considered a hate crime in US. The police wanted to prosecute, and they can do it even without the permission of the temple. But what our temple pujaris and the temple community said was, they were just some misguided elements. It's not hate crime. They just were foolish. They were not after Hindus. They could have done it to anybody. So this is the Hindu society saying. While the police over there is saying it is a hate crime, they will be prosecuted as persons who have committed hate crime, because for committing hate crimes, the punishment is bigger. So because this has been inculcated in your minds, you become afraid to accept that some injustice has been committed to you. You don't think you are worthy of respect. My time is almost over. I have some examples like gods and goddesses. So we have a certain belief that how they came, how Vishnu came, and how Brahma ji came. But most of the important gods and goddesses, how they have been depicted in these history books, is that they were worshipped in some cults. Cults is a derogatory term to call people, because they just believe mindlessly for one person, and it's not as respectable as following a religion. So what they do is, Vishnu ji was worshipped by a cult, and Shiv ji was worshipped by a cult, and slowly they became absorbed in the Hindu dharma. So then they don't have that, we have that reverence, we think they are big, and the way they are introduced is like they were just some tribals of maybe 1,000 people were worshipping them, and they came absorbed into Hindu society. So they talk about Jagannath, cult like that. These are the exact words from the book. Cult of Jagannath, literally Lord of the World, a name for Vishnu at Puri, Odisha. To date, a local tribal people make the wooden images of the deity, which suggests no proof that the deity was originally a local god who was later identified as Vishnu. So these were all local gods. Another important thing, even though my time is up, I will take 1 minute, because I have to tell you about this destruction of temple. It is a hot topic these days. And after the judgment came, maybe this was before that also, I didn't check the older edition, but this is the new edition of the book. After the judgment from High Court on Ayodhya came, it was proved that a temple existed and it was destroyed and a mosque came on it. So now they want to justify why the temples were broken. So first what they do is extensively describe how Hindu and Baudd kings destroyed temples and looted murtis. Okay? there might have been some stray examples, but that was not the norm, that when one Hindu king attacked and won another kingdom, they did not go and destroy the temples. But here, that is what is depicted. Then, after for 2.5 paragraphs, they have described, given the Hindu examples, then in 4 or 5 lines, they say that Ghazni was their contemporary. So when this was going, Ghazni was their contemporary. He was also a ruler at the time. By destroying and looting temples, he was simply following political culture of that time. So it was not like he selectively chose. He was simply doing what other Hindu kings were doing too. And I don't mean that you should read all this. This is from class 7th book. I'm just showing you how much space has been given to justify. So there is this one slide which tells how Hindu kings and Baudd kings destroyed temples and took murtis with them. Second slide, and then half of third slide. Now let us come to Ghazni. These are exact words in the book. So while you saw those 2.5 slides of how Hindus destroyed, you see this Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni was a contemporary of Rajendra I. Rajendra I is the king who is supposed to have destroyed temples. During his campaigns in subcontinent, campaigns, they are not attacks or invasions. In subcontinents, he also attacked the temples of defeated kings and looted their wealth and idols. Sultan Mahmud was not very important ruler at the time, but by destroying temples, especially the one at Somnath, he tried to win credit as a great hero of Islam. Then justification starts in the red. In the political culture of Middle Ages, most rulers displayed their political might and military success by attacking and looting the places of worship and defeated rulers. So he was not doing anything against Hindus as such. He was just following the culture at that time. And then there are the children. To make sure that, it drills into mind, they are asked, in what ways do you think the policies of Rajendra I and Mahmud of Ghazni were a product of their times? How were the actions of the two rulers different? So what they have done is created a parity. What Hindus have done, what Muslims have done is the same. And this is how they treat the partition also. In fact, they don't describe what happened to Hindus in Pakistan when they were fleeing. They only describe what happened in Delhi, which is the Muslims were terrorized and Hindus from Pakistan came and they forcibly evicted the Muslims from their home to occupy their houses. And the terrorized Muslims were leaving Delhi, leaving India, Bharat. So what is slowly inculcated in the mind is that, first of all, violence is on both sides, it's equal. And second is that it's happening because of Hindus are doing something. The victim is to be blamed. We have seen that in news reports also. After 2002 riots happened, nobody talked about why the riots happened. People only talked about 2002 happening. And after that, lot of terrorist activities were attributed to the riots of 2002, that as a means of justification, that because that happened, they were very upset and they did this. And same thing happens in the book also. So Sanskrit also is, instead of having it as a mother of Bharatiya languages, it is described as just one of the languages. And there are Dravidian languages, and I'm leaving. And Tibeto-Burman. So all the languages have been broken into different families rather than all the languages having one mother, that is Sanskrit. So that is how you break the importance of Sanskrit, because we keep talking about having one common language which should be Sanskrit in Bharat. So if you divide them into different families and Sanskrit becomes just one of them, then that cannot be a unifier. So the idea here is to break down the unifier. Brahmins we have already talked about. Yeah. So how wonderful others are. So while they are telling you how bad your ancestors were, they tell how wonderful others were. So here is a question. There is a big description, but I got this question and I try to use the same words that are in the book. So these are same words in the book. How did the Mughal courts suggest that everyone, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the weak, received justice equally from the emperor? So, while Hindus discriminated so much against all sorts of people, these are such nice people. You know, in the court, in Mughal court, everybody is equal, and they made sure, even they made their architecture like that, that everybody will have the same access to the same justice, no matter who you are. I have found. Okay, then there is a Bible quotation also. They actually write what Bible says. Now, we are secular people. Why are we quoting Bible to such extent? So they have this quotation from Bible to tell you how good they were, and people really liked the teachings of Bible. And people, to escape the oppression of caste, they learned English, they turned to Christianity, then they became very prosperous and respected. So the message is, one who is sitting far away, that if you turn to Christianity, you will learn English, you turn to Christianity, all your problems will go away. So this is the message that is being, Sikhism I already talked about. Okay. So we basically need to rewrite our books. Okay, we need to rewrite our books. This is just propaganda to advance someone else's agenda. We need to rewrite our books, and we must. Thank you.
We have been allotted 1 hour 30 minutes time, and I think one more speaker was expected to be here. But as she was not there, that part of her has been given to me, and I have to play two roles, that is chairman and speaker, so which I have played, I think. She was supposed to speak on law, Hindu women and society, and therefore we all four have tried to cover all the aspects which are particularly related to Hindu women, education and law. Do you have any questions? Now the forum is open. Yes, please.
One moment. We'll keep the questions and answers, both of them short, because we are really running out of time. And we have to meet again at 6:30 in the convention hall for the plenary session. So once this is over, we conclude. The chairman will conclude, and we'll take the break, and we'll meet again, 6:30. Please don't go walk off. We'll meet again.
Yes, you said something about you wanted to. Mic is there? Please give the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Santosh Kalyan. I'm a member of parliament from South Africa. I would just like to, thank you. I would just like to tell you how I'm using my political platform to advance the cause for both Indian and Muslim women. In the apartheid era, our marriages traditional marriages were not recognized. So if you got married in a temple or a mosque, you had to also go through a civil union if you wanted your marriage recognized. I myself have 2 wedding dates. One day on which I got married Hindu, and the other day when I had to go for civil union. So as a politician, I have been consulting. I'm in the opposition, so I can't make the law, but I have been asked to be the consultant with the governing party to formulate the law, and now it's just about to be passed for Muslim women. Their marriages are recognized as customary marriages, and it has an impact on how they inherit property, especially if the husband takes a second or a third wife. And now I'm also in the process of consulting for Hindu women to see how we can fit it in if you're married to customary law, how your accrual or your community of property in terms of benefits in the case of divorce. And then a question to the panelists, how many people are taking up positions to study teaching? Because in South Africa, it's not a wonderful profession anymore, it's declining. And that is a problem. Thank you.
It is.
Your question is to the speaker? Indiraji. Indiraji. Good, good. Yes. Improving the quality of teachers.
Yes, request to you. Can you please repeat your question?
My question is that at one stage, teaching was a very recognized profession. Now I find back home in South Africa, it's no more a noble profession. We have to beg people to become teachers, even though it's free. What has your study shown in terms of the take-up of teaching as a profession by women?
So basically, she means how we can encourage women to take up teaching and
Yeah.
be part.
Again, like I was discussing about art in rural children, it comes from within. You should feel that I should be a teacher. That is the main potential required for the teaching profession. That is one thing. And another thing, by giving training, you can mold the personality as a whole. That is also possible. So we can mold personalities in teaching profession. Of course, it is very noble profession. So it has happened in our society, especially in Bharat, it is happening, and countries, in many of the Arabian countries, it is happening, Asian countries, it is happening, that people feel, Arey, you are in teaching profession, because people are not earning in teaching profession. So it is stamped now. If you have to be in teaching profession, you should not think about earning. But still, those who are in this profession, they are committed people, I can say. And they are giving a big thing to the society, being in teaching profession. And in that way, teaching profession is very noble profession.
Yes. You have a question, no? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and be brief and make a direct question. Your question
हेलो
is to
एवरीवन,
whom?
मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगी. मैं फिजी से हूँ और मुझे आशा है सब लोग हिंदी समझते होंगे. मेरा सवाल ये है, अभी तक जो मैंने सुना है आप सभी से, सभी ने महिलाओं के संघर्ष, उनकी समस्याएं, उनके भविष्य, इन सभी विषयों के बारे में बात की है. मेरे ख्याल से जैसे भारत में आप बोलें कि माइंडसेट जो होता है, एक घर के अंदर महिला जिस तरह से तारी जाती है, प्रताड़ना उन्हें सहना पड़ता है, इसमें सरासर जैसे बोलते हैं ना, दोनों हाथों से तालियां बजती हैं. तो घर में पुरुष भी रहता है, पुरुष वर्ग भी होते हैं, बच्चे भी होते हैं, जो हमारे बेटे हैं वो भी देखते हैं. यह सिलसिला जारी रहता है. तो मैं ये अपनी महिलाओं से पूछना चाहूँगी कि महिलाओं की प्रगति, उनके भविष्य, उनके फ्यूचर के लिए जो इतनी बातें हो रही हैं, हम लोगों ने पुरुष वर्ग को समझाने, सिखाने और उन्हें बदलने में कितनी भूमिका निभाई है, ये मैं जानना चाहता हूँ. थैंक यू. आम रूप से कोई भी इस पर सवाल का जवाब दे सकता. सॉरी.
बहुत बढ़िया प्रश्न पूछा है आपने. वी आर स्ट्रेसिंग फ्रॉम मॉर्निंग, वी आर स्ट्रेसिंग कि अगर एक महिला को शिक्षा मिल जाएगी, सो शी विल डेवलप द होल फैमिली. तो उसमें पुरुष वर्ग भी आता है. तो घर में जो भी स्त्री है, जो भी महिला है, उसको ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं करना चाहिए. बिकॉज यू आर अ बॉय, यू विल नॉट डू दिस. बिकॉज यू आर अ गर्ल, यू आर सपोज टू डू दिस. सो ये डिस्क्रिमिनेशन कौन स्टॉप करेगा? महिला ही स्टॉप करेगी. हाँ, पुरुष लोग तो कम हिस्सा लेंगे इसमें, बिकॉज वी आर हैविंग मेल डोमिनेटेड सोसाइटी. सो महिलाओं का ही यही काम है, और महिला में वो शक्ति है जो ये कर सकती हैं. इसीलिए मैंने अभी जो बताया कि वी शुड कैच यंग पीपल, यंग चिल्ड्रन. जब भी बच्चे छोटे हैं, चाइल्डहुड से ही, वी आर सपोज टू ट्रीट देम इन सच अ वे, वी आर सपोज टू ग्रूम देम इन सच अ वे दैट दे विल नॉट डिस्क्रिमिनेट in the society, and they will perform all the work which is required for the family. So बच्चों को अगर लेबर वर्क के लिए भी बताया जाएगा, तो इसलिए इस प्रकार के संस्कार केंद्र जो है वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा होने चाहिए, और महिला ये संस्कार केंद्र ज़्यादा अच्छी तरह से रन कर सकेगी, बिकॉज शी इज़ हैविंग द व्यू ऑफ मल्टीटास्किंग. महिलाओं के पास ये मल्टीटास्किंग पर्सनालिटीज़ होती हैं. पुरुष लोग एक काम लेते हैं तो 10 बार बोलते हैं कि ये काम किया और ये भी किया, लेकिन महिला जो है वो 10 तरह के काम एक साथ करती है, एक साथ हाथ से एक काम करती है, ब्रेन में और कुछ चल रहा है, एक हाथ से एक और दूसरे हाथ से दूसरा भी करती है और ब्रेन में कुछ चलता रहता है। तो ये मल्टीटास्किंग पर्सनालिटी है, ये वरदान दिया है महिलाओं को, तो इसका उपयोग हमको करना चाहिए ज़रूर।
Thank you. I'm Aparna Vastare from Bengaluru.
Just a minute, she has not completed yet.
मेरा सवाल ये था कि अभी तक पुरुष वर्ग को समझाने में महिलाओं ने कितनी भूमिका में प्रगति की है?
Okay.
मेरा ये सवाल था।
Okay,
क्या
okay.
कोई सर्वेक्षण हुआ है?
Yes.
कोई percentage changes आया हम लोगों में, क्या एजुकेशनल सिस्टम में हुआ है कि ये सारी भूमिकाएं पुरुष वर्ग में changes कभी जाके सारी भूमिका
ये सर्वेक्षण तो मुझे नहीं पता कोई सर्वेक्षण हुआ हो, लेकिन ये सर्वेक्षण तो आते रहते हैं कि कितने पुरुष घर में हाथ बटाते हैं काम का, और वो फिगर्स तो बहुत ही इनकरेजिंग है, क्योंकि आजकल का लाइफस्टाइल ही ऐसा है कि
मैं ये जानना चाहूँगी कि ये जितनी ज़्यादा शिक्षा अभी इस हमारे भारतीय समाज में दी जा रही है, उतनी ज़्यादा समस्याएं बढ़ रही हैं, ऐसा क्यों है? मैं ये जानना चाहूँगी, हम लोग बहुत कुछ कर रहे हैं।
I got your question. You wanted to say जो भी महिलाओं के अगेंस्ट में हो रहे हैं, जैसे क्राइम्स बढ़ रहे हैं, ये जो भी बढ़ रहा है, तो इसके लिए हम आज यह कहते हैं कि we are saying that women can be empowered through law and education or many other things. But what should be done regarding the male education and what women have given to them? Yes, am I correct? That is the question. As a mother, we will have to give the ship.
मैं ये जानना चाहूँगी, इस प्लेटफॉर्म के बाद यहाँ जो चर्चा हो रही है 3 दिनों के बीच, इसके बाद मैं चाहती हूँ कि हमारी महिलाएं मिलकर एक ऐसा पटिशन लिखें, ताकि ये पटिशन या कुछ ऐसा विचार रखें या रेजोल्यूशन रखें जो आगे तक जाएं कि हमारे देश, पूरे विश्व के जो माइंडसेट हैं पुरुषों का, वो बदल जाए।
Thank
Yes,
you.
other question?
And we are really running out of time, so let's stick to, if you want to take questions, just one line question, 1 line, 2 line answer, and let's
वो
end it.
इनको है ना काफ़ी देर से ये वेट कर रही हैं, ये सामने।
Please do come here.
I just want to say something. This morning at the starting session, there were so many males. We women were not sitting there in the front, and that's something to think about.
She wants to. You can.
This is just to really thank Indira Madam for, it was such an eye-opener, because we studied history like this. Yeah. And as kids, I remember I used to feel ashamed that, we have done like this, and it was really an eye-opener. And this question is to Srimati Padma Kupa. You said it's so difficult to make them understand that we are Hindus, we are Shias and Sunnis. How effective can we be, and how have you? I'm sure it's a big challenge to convey it, to communicate, and to convince them. How have you done this?
We've actually been somewhat successful by forming partnerships with other groups. In California, in 2005, the Hindu American Foundation won a lawsuit along with an alliance of other groups against the State Board of Education, which is what, just like you have the NCRT, what is taught, there are laws now in California that this is what is taught, and we won a lawsuit saying that that needs to be corrected. And we are further, one of the things, as someone pointed out earlier, that people are not going into education because there is a lack of remuneration. People are not paid well if they become teachers. And so one of the things, there's also not a lot of money invested. In America, a lot of education is public. And so a lot of what we do is try to provide educational materials that are updated that teachers in the classroom can use for that. Just can I answer one thing for the other lady that was saying, what are we going to do with the males? My matrubhasha is Telugu, so if you wanted to really get me to understand, you would have had to give me that question in Telugu. With my poor Hindi, what I understood is she asked, what can we do? And I said, during my presentation, I said, why was this only for the women's conference? Violence against women is a men's issue. We should be in every one of the work streams. This should have been covered.
Okay, just one.
I think so many women do have many questions, but we don't have time.
Please, 1 minute. This. Hello, please.
If organizers are permitting me, then I have no objection. Should I wind up? Okay. Anjana.
Hello. My name is.
Actually, it looks that all the people, all the sisters who are sitting here, they have enjoyed this particular session.
Please. My name is Dr. Jyotsna Srinivasan.
Please, please.
Please. My name is Dr. Jyotsna Srinivasan. I'm from New Jersey. Can you hear me?
Yeah. She wants.
You know, this is for Mrs. Tiwari, for her books or whatever. My son, I am from USA.
One suggestion, we have to get back to the other hall. I feel that we're all very happy to answer your
they don't
questions,
even let me
but can you
speak.
ask us directly and maybe before we go to the hall?
Just 1 minute. So this is for Mrs. Tiwari. When my son was in grade 8 in USA, they write in that book, history book, that Hindus wish they are born as cow after they die. That was shocking. So you might add this thing for Mrs. Tiwari if you write a book, that's what they write in the book. The Hindus after death, they wish they will be born as cow. It was so shocking. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah. Actually, when I went to study, this is the first thing about Hinduism that my lab mates told me, that you guys want to be cows when you die. So I was very shocked, like where was this coming from? And when my children started studying, when I got married, had children, and they studied, and then I figured out, okay, this is where they are coming from, because this they have been taught in schools. And for that, there are a lot of Hindu organizations like HAF, and there are other organizations also who have fought battles in court to rectify this.
Yeah, one last comment.
Friends, now,
Swami Vivekananda
please.
Ma'am, you have spent 1.5 hours and you are not giving me 10 seconds. Please allow me to speak. I have requested so much.
Friends, now
see, just
women
1 second. Please, ma'am. Just 10 seconds. Swami Vivekananda ji said that the civilizations in the past were built by men and destroyed because of women, like Helen of Troy. And he said the future civilization will be built by women, preserved and protected. And if that civilization has to come, all the women have to see that men and women are equal and they are treated properly and educated properly. And our Hindu Samskriti of Shiva and Parvati being Ardhanarishwara should be practically practiced by each one of us in our family, in our society. Thank you.
Friends, now women have created her image in society. Hello? She is there in every field, working with confidence.
Hello?
From catwalk to spacewalk, she is there. We can change the world. I would like to say, never dream to witness change. Always have a desire to be the change yourself. Respect the recognition given to us by society and legal protection extended to us. Friends, women possesses the power to create, nurture and transform. Be proud of womanhood. Let the society be proud of us. Thank you. Thank you for your participation, and I thank you all the speakers for contributing to this session. Thank you very much.